Welcome, traveler of stars and seeker of forgotten truths. Tonight, as the galaxy slumbers and the stars drift like watchful sentinels across the void, I invite you to join me on a journey deep into the shadows of legend and memory. If you find comfort in tales long buried, in voices lost to time yet still echoing across the stars, then you are exactly where you are meant to be. If this story stirs something within you, consider staying with us and letting your dreams carry you further into the mystery. There are stories whispered across the galaxy that no history ever dared to write. Stories of fallen empires and broken heroes. Stories of redemption born not in glory but in quiet moments of unbearable truth. And among them, one tale is feared and revered more than any other. The tale of the one who fell furthest yet rose, again not in triumph, but in sacrifice. This is the entire story of Darth Vader's path to redemption. Not the version sung in ballads or recorded in the Jedi archives. This is the version buried beneath ash and silence, told only by the Force itself to those who know how to listen. The legend begins not with fire, but with a whisper. A whisper carried on the wind through the ruins of a forgotten temple, one so ancient even the oldest Jedi dared not speak its name. In that silence, a single word was heard: Padme. Decades later, on the frozen world of Darth Prime, deep beneath the crystalline ice, explorers unearthed a sealed holocron bearing the unmistakable crest of House Skywalker. But something was wrong. The crystal was fractured, the data corrupted by symbols from the ancient Sith tongue. When they activated it, only a single fragment played, a deep mechanical breath. Then a voice, low and trembling. I tried to save them. All of them. The holocron shut down. The explorers vanished. The next day, all that remained was the recording and the feeling that something had awoken, something that had never truly died. Now the journey begins. Section 2 echoes in the Force. Word count 79. The stars had long since faded into silence when I first arrived on the desolate moon of Malachor. It hung in the darkness like a forgotten wound, scarred by ancient wars and the secrets of those who wielded the Force without mercy or restraint. The surface was cracked and still, its jagged cliffs rising like the bones of a long-dead beast. Cold winds howled through the canyons, carrying the scent of scorched stone and something older, something that waited. This was no ordinary world. It was a place where light and dark once collided with such fury that even time seemed to fracture. Jedi scrolls had called it cursed, Sith records labeled it sacred. But neither side dared to return. Not until now. I came not as a warrior, but as a seeker. The voices had led me here. Whispers in the Force. Fragments of memory that refused to fade. The holocron from Darth Prime had been my guide, its fractured message burning through my thoughts every time I closed my eyes. I tried to save them, all of them. Vader's voice, or was it Anakin's? That question alone demanded an answer. The path into the ruins was buried beneath the dust of centuries. I descended into shadow, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the stillness. The temperature dropped as I moved deeper, and a faint glow began to pulse from the moss-covered walls. It was not natural light. It was the Force itself, concentrated and restless. The chamber ahead had once been a sanctuary, though it no longer offered peace. Massive stone pillars loomed on either side, carved with symbols from forgotten orders. Some were Jedi, others Sith, and others older still. In the center stood a pedestal of obsidian, worn smooth by time. Resting atop it was a data slate, humming faintly. The screen flickered to life as I approached, revealing fragmented messages, left behind by a chronicler who had followed Vader's trail long before me. The messages spoke of a final confrontation. A moment aboard a space station suspended above a forest moon, of a son facing a father, of lightning and sacrifice. But the details were torn, as if something had erased the truth just before it could be understood. The last entry ended abruptly with the words, "He looked at me, not as Vader, but as someone else." And in that moment, I saw him. But saw who? Anakin, the chosen one? Or a ghost of what might have been? A quiet chime pulled me from the message. It came from my companion, a protocol droid reprogrammed for archival work and historical analysis. His voice was soft and uncertain. "Sir, I am detecting harmonic fluctuations beneath the foundation. Some kind of buried chamber, sealed, possibly. Very old." We followed the readings to a hidden hatch, long fused shut by sediment and age. With effort and care, I opened it. A rush of air escaped, dry and cold. What lay beneath was no longer part of the galaxy above. We descended slowly, lanterns casting, long shadows on the spiraling staircase. The chamber at the bottom was vast and circular, lined with statues of ancient Force users, their faces worn smooth. At the far end, a throne sat empty, but not untouched. Scorch marks spread across its surface, and beside it the floor had cracked inward, as if torn by something violent and sudden. Then we saw it, a single black glove preserved beneath glass. The fingertips melted, the material scorched. It had been retrieved from Endor, from the wreckage of the second Death Star, by unknown hands. How it found its way here remained a mystery. But there was no doubt. It was his. I closed my eyes and reached out. What I felt was not rage nor hatred. It was something far more haunting, regret, deep and endless, woven through the very structure of the room like music played in mourning. The Force responded not with visions but with emotions, loneliness, shame, and above all, a desperate need to be understood. In that moment I realized this place was not a shrine to Darth Vader. It was a tomb for Anakin Skywalker, not of his body, but of his memory. Someone had preserved this place to keep a piece of him hidden, buried beneath the weight of what he had become. My companion approached a second terminal, barely operational. A single file remained intact. No image, just a voice, older now, worn. "If they remember me only as Vader, then I have truly died. But if one voice speaks my name, Anakin, then perhaps I still remain." The message ended. The screen went dark. My heart pounded in the silence. I understood now that the holocron on Jedah's Prime was only one piece of a far larger puzzle. There were others, other recordings, other memories, and someone was gathering them. We left the chamber in silence, carrying with us more questions than answers. The wind howled louder now, as if warning us to turn back. But the path was already set. The journey had begun. And somewhere ahead, hidden among stars and ruins, the full story of Darth Vader's redemption waited to be uncovered, not as a myth, not as a rumor, but as a truth buried in the Force itself. Section 3. Tracing the Fall Word. Count. 880, the stars above Malachor K faded behind us as we lifted from its surface, the shuttle groaning in protest as it tore away from the ancient gravity. The relics we had gathered pulsed softly in their containment chambers. Each artifact, each whisper of the past, seemed to murmur beneath the hum of the ship. The journey had begun, though I was no longer certain if I had chosen it or if it had chosen me. From the holocron to the ruined throne room, the pieces had started to align. There was a pattern, a trail hidden in fragments of forgotten memory. Whoever had gathered these relics, whoever had tried to preserve the story of Vader's final hour, had done so not to glorify him, but to understand him, and to protect something. Our next destination came from the voice print embedded in the terminal beneath the ruins. Cross-referenced with old Imperial star charts and abandoned hyperspace routes, it led us to a remote listening post suspended above a fractured moon in the Arcanis sector. During the war, it had been used to monitor transmissions between rebel cells. After the rise of the Empire, it was left to rot. As our shuttle approached, the station drifted like a skeleton in space, its panels torn and hanging, its lights long extinguished. We docked carefully, manual override required. Inside, the silence was complete. Only the echo of our footsteps broke the darkness as we passed through collapsed corridors and flickering control rooms. In the heart of the station, buried beneath rusted panels and layers of ash, we found a data spire still intact. Its core was encrypted, but the droid's slicing protocols began to peel back its protections. The system hummed to life, and a playback began. No visuals, only sound, static, crackled, then the unmistakable hiss of a lightsaber. Heavy breathing followed, mechanical and deep. Then a voice. "Luke Skywalker, Father, I will not fight you." Another clash. Sparks, pain in the voice of the younger man, then silence. What followed was not combat, but breathing. Slower now, strained. "You were right about me. Tell your sister you were right." The recording ended abruptly. No explanation, no date, no indication of what followed. But I knew the moment it had captured, the turning point, the hour when Darth Vader, enforcer of the Empire, made a choice that no one had expected, a choice to save his son. The moment had become legend, passed down in fragmented retellings, but what truly happened between them had never been recorded in full, until now. This fragment confirmed that someone had gathered the actual transmissions from that final confrontation, and they had been hiding them, preserving them, protecting them. But why? We scoured the station further and found one last clue. A transmission log sent just days after the fall of the second Death Star. The origin point was an old Jedi archive ship, long thought destroyed during the Clone Wars. But the log suggested it had survived and that its final jump had been traced to the outer reaches. No destination. No return. A decision had to be made. We could remain in known space, hunting scraps and fragments, or we could follow the archive vessel into the edge of the galaxy, where hyperspace lanes twisted into the unknown and stars vanished into mist. I chose to follow the silence. The departure was quiet. We left behind the hollow corridors of the station and returned to our ship. As we entered hyperspace, I watched the stars stretch into streams of light. And in that endless moment between destinations, a vision came to me. Not a dream. Something more. A child stood alone in a chamber, filled with golden light. His eyes were filled with wonder and fear. In his hands he held a small tool, barely steady in his grasp, Around him floated pieces of metal and glass, trembling with potential. But then the room darkened, the light vanished, and the boy became a figure clad in black, his breath mechanical and haunting. I reached out. He turned. I tried to save them, all of them. I awoke with a start as the ship emerged from hyperspace. Ahead of us lay a void, an expanse of drifting debris and shattered hulls. No star shone here. No planets remained. Only the forgotten bones of battles and lost fleets. And at the heart of it, a signal pulsed faintly. A beacon, ancient in its coding. We locked onto it and prepared for descent. Somewhere below, hidden in the silence between stars, the archive ship waited, along with the next piece of the story. What we would find there, I could not yet imagine. But something told me that the truth of Vader's redemption did not begin with Luke. It began with the Fall, Section 4, Ashes of the Chosen One. Word count 980, the void around us was absolute. The stars had vanished behind curtains of ancient dust, and the signal we followed pulsed like the heartbeat of something buried and restless. Our vessel glided forward in silence, lights cutting thin beams through drifting wreckage. The remnants of war lay scattered, stripped of name and banner, as if the galaxy itself had tried to forget them. In the center of this forgotten graveyard drifted a ship unlike any other. Its hull was scorched and half collapsed, but its form was unmistakable. A Jedi archive vessel designed to carry the knowledge of generations. This one was older than the Clone Wars, older even than the fall of the High Republic. Its markings had faded, but its purpose had not. We docked with care. The outer airlock resisted at first, as though reluctant to awaken. Then it opened with a groan, revealing the dark interior of a ship that had not seen light in decades. Inside, the corridors were lined with dust and silence. Scrolls floated in zero gravity, their bindings frayed, their contents preserved by sealed air. Statues of Jedi Masters loomed from alcoves, their eyes closed, as if still meditating in eternal slumber. The ship had become a tomb of knowledge, drifting through the dark like a final prayer. It was the droid who first sensed the irregularity. A panel had been opened recently, its edges free of dust. Wires had been rerouted, something had been reactivated. Followed the trail through the silent corridors to the center of the vessel, where the Jedi archives were stored. The doors were partially ajar, as if someone had fled in haste. Inside, the light flickered. Dozens of holocrons hovered in a suspended grid, projecting fractured images of Jedi councils, ancient duels, and forgotten wars. But one holocron sat, alone, its casing obsidian and etched with both Jedi and Sith symbols. It pulsed with a rhythm that did not match the others. When I reached for it, the Force stirred, not violently but with weight. Memory pressed against my thoughts as if testing me. I activated the holocron. The projection flared to life, revealing a flickering image. A figure in a Jedi robe stood in the center of the room. He turned slowly. It was Anakin Skywalker. You don't understand what they asked of me, what they expected me to become. The chosen one. The one who would bring balance. But what is balance when all you feel is the pull of both sides tearing you apart? The image shifted. Anakin stood over the body of Count Dooku. His hands trembled. The blue of his saber slowly faded into red. Another scene. Anakin standing before the Jedi Council. Mace Windu turning away. The voice of the council echoed. "You are on this council, But we do not grant you the rank of master. Anakin's voice again. They feared me. I saw it in their eyes. They didn't want balance. They wanted control. The images vanished, replaced by
static. Then one final message played. Not a scene, but a sentence.
They were wrong about me. But so was he. The holocron powered down. A silence followed that no words could fill. I stood motionless, the echoes of those moments still ringing in my ears. They had always told the story as if Anakin's fall had been sudden, a clean break between light and dark. But this holocron proved otherwise. The truth was far more complex. His descent had not been a collapse, but a slow unraveling, a battle waged inside him long before the armor, long before the breathing mask and the black cloak. I turned to the droid. Someone went to great lengths to save this. He nodded, scanning. Deeper into the archives systems, sir, I believe this holocron was part of a larger collection. Cross-referencing the metadata, it appears that 7 similar entries once existed. This is only the 4th. The others are still missing. He paused, then added, and someone has been searching for them. Recently. Before I could respond, the lights in the chamber flickered. The temperature dropped. A sound, faint and sharp, echoed through the corridor. Not mechanical, not structural. Breathing. We backed away slowly, weapons unholstered but unused. The sound did not return. The shadows grew longer, but nothing emerged. Still, the feeling remained. We were not alone. I secured the holocron and encrypted its data. Whatever truth it contained, it was now part of our journey. But as we returned to the ship, I could not shake the final words that Anakin had spoken. They were wrong about me. But so was he. He meant Sidious. The one who promised him power, the one who claimed to see his potential and twisted it into something
monstrous. Anakin had seen through him, even if it came too late. Back on the ship, I replayed the holocron again, focusing on his face. There was pain there, yes, but behind it, something more, conflict, hope, regret, and I began to wonder, what?
If the first steps toward redemption had not been taken in the throne room of the Death Star, but here, in the quiet moments of memory and doubt, Anakin buried beneath the armor, what if the redemption of Darth Vader began long before anyone dared to believe it possible? As the stars once again stretched before us and we plotted our next course, I felt the Force shift, gently, subtly. The truth was waking. And it was not finished speaking. Section 5. The Mask of Truth. Word. Count 890. The stars burned colder as we traveled deeper into the outer rim, where forgotten systems drifted uncharted and unnamed. Each step we took brought us closer to something vast and hidden, yet the answers remained just beyond reach. The holocron from the Jedi archive ship had ignited a fire of questions, and one in particular refused to fade. What if Vader had begun to break free long before his final act? Our next lead came not from the Force, but from intercepted Imperial fragments stored in an old rebellion data vault. They referenced a facility, long decommissioned, used by Palpatine's inner circle for classified psychological assessments. Not prisoners, but loyalists, those who had stood too close to Vader and lived. The station was buried in the rings of a dead planet, shielded by asteroid interference. It took hours to land without detection. Inside we found what looked like a medical research outpost, but its true nature revealed itself in the details. One room held nothing but empty armor casings carefully preserved. Another was filled with broken mirrors, their reflections shattered by forceful impact. At the core, we found a memory chamber, The walls were lined with blackstone, the floor inlaid with sigils that matched Sith architecture. In the center stood a reclined chair surrounded by audio recording spires. Each spire still hummed, faint and cold. We activated one. The room, filled with static, then with a voice that chilled the air. He dreams of fire, always fire, and her voice, the one he could not save. The speaker was unidentified, but clearly imperial. Another recording followed. He hesitates before missions, not out of fear, but something worse, remorse. The Emperor believes it is weakness. I believe it is memory. More files unlocked. One detailed an encounter in the 3rd year of the Empire's rise. A rebellion cell had surrendered on Corvax Prime. Vader was ordered to execute the survivors. He complied. All but one. A young woman, no older than Padme had been. She had pleaded for her life. According to the log, Vader paused. Troopers assumed he was malfunctioning. The report was buried. We sat in silence as the truth settled around us. It was a chilling realization. The mask of Darth Vader had never been perfect. There had been cracks in it, moments of silence, of resistance. The droid studied the encryption further. Sir, it appears that these records were altered after the fact. Someone tried to rewrite them, hide the hesitation. Who would do that? Only 2 names appeared in the redaction logs. One was Tarkin, the other Palpatine. The deception was clear. The galaxy had been told that Darth Vader was an unbreakable force of obedience, a monster in armor. But these logs whispered another truth, that he doubted, that he remembered, that he resisted, even in the smallest of ways. And then came the false conclusion. It struck me like a revelation, as if the entire mystery had unraveled in a single breath. Vader's redemption was never real. It was orchestrated, a final manipulation by Palpatine, a way to push Luke Skywalker to the edge. The rescue of the son was merely another layer of the Sith's deception, a cruel trick designed to give the illusion of love, to turn hope into control. The theory made sense. Too much sense. It explained the hidden logs, the secrecy, the redactions. It explained why the holocrons had been scattered. The entire redemption story was a fabrication, but even as I spoke it aloud, something felt wrong. Not in logic, but in the Force. The droid turned, uncertain. Sir, if that is true, why preserve the holocrons at all? Why not destroy them? I had no answer. In the corridor outside, a sound echoed, metal scraping. A faint tremble beneath our feet. We turned, weapons raised, but nothing came. Just silence, deep and hollow. We left the station with heavy thoughts. I documented the theory, marked the logs and filed them away, but I could not bring myself to declare it as truth, because something in me still clung to the memory of that voice, that last breath from the throne room of the Death Star. You were right about me. If that had been a lie, it was the most perfect lie the galaxy had ever known. But the Force did not speak in deceptions. It spoke in feelings, in echoes, in lingering shadows that refused to vanish. Back aboard the ship, I stood at the viewport and looked into the void. For a moment, I thought I saw the shape of a man watching me from the reflection. Cloaked, silent. Then the vision faded. The theory was strong, compelling, but something inside whispered that it was not the whole story. We had solved one mystery, but a deeper one had just begun. Section 6, The Temple Beneath the Throne. Word count 1080. We followed the last coordinates extracted from the redacted Imperial logs deep into the inner core where ancient hyperspace lanes had long been buried by solar storms and stellar debris. No official map recognized this region anymore. The systems here were choked by blackened stars and veiled in magnetic storms that erased all signals. It was here, hidden beneath the shadow of a long collapsed star, that the final outpost waited. It was called Geridou's Hollow. Once a fortress of the old Republic, later repurposed by the Empire as a vault for restricted Sith relics. Now it drifted in the silence of time, sealed from the galaxy. Forgotten, except by those who knew where to look. We approached carefully. There was no defensive grid, no warning beacon. Only the yawning mouth of a station carved into the face of an
asteroid.
As we docked, the doors opened without resistance, as if expecting us. Inside, the corridors curved like the bones of a buried serpent. The lights flickered dimly along the walls, casting long shadows that moved even when we stood still. The air was thin but breathable. Time had not entirely claimed this place. What struck us first was the silence. Not the emptiness of abandonment, but the weight of something sacred. Every step echoed as if walking inside the memories of the Force itself. The structure was ancient beyond reckoning. Beneath the Imperial panels, we uncovered older symbols carved into the stone. Sith glyphs, Jedi mantras, and something older than both. The central chamber awaited us at the heart of the complex. Its door stood 3 stories tall, made of obsidian and durasteel fused together by intense heat. The mechanism to open it had long corroded, but the droid interfaced with the remnants of the system, bypassing layers of forgotten encryption. When the door finally opened, a wave of cold air swept over us. Not a physical chill, but one that passed through the skin and into the soul. Inside was a vast domed room, lit from above by a single crystal suspended in the air, glowing with soft white light. Around the perimeter, 12 thrones stood in a perfect circle, each one unique, each bearing a different crest of power, Jedi, Sith, and symbols that did not belong to either. This was no mere archive. It was a convergence point, a place where the deepest secrets of the Force had been debated, hidden, or buried. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and upon it a holocron unlike any we had seen. Its casing was made of silver and black, stone seamlessly interwoven. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. I reached for it and felt resistance. The Force pressed back, not in anger, but in warning. When I activated it, the room darkened, the crystal above dimmed, and a figure appeared before us. Not a recording, a presence. The illusion of a man, tall and cloaked, his face hidden. His voice was calm and low. You search for the truth of Vader. You seek the line between shadow and salvation. Then you must understand what was buried. The image shifted, showing a secret gathering. Vader stood among cloaked figures. Their identities were obscured, but their presence was heavy with power. They were not Sith in the traditional sense. They wore no markings, they pledged to no master, and Vader stood among them not as servant, but as equal. The voice returned. They were the circle of the veil, formed in secret after the fall of the Jedi, drawn together not by creed, but by revelation. They had seen what the Jedi could not. That light and dark were no longer opposites, but fractured reflections of the same failing. The holocron revealed visions of hidden meetings, of debates about the nature of the Chosen One. Some believed Anakin had fulfilled the prophecy through destruction. Others believed he had failed it entirely. But Vader remained silent in all of them, watching, listening. Then the voice concluded, "He came here, to this temple, one final time before Endor." He spoke no words. He placed his saber upon the pedestal and walked alone into the chamber of memory. What he saw there, none can say. But when he emerged, he took the saber back, and his path was set. The vision faded. The light returned. We stood in silence. The weight of what we had seen settled like dust on ancient stone. This was the second open loop, a deeper truth. Vader had not only hesitated in his service to the Emperor, he had sought others, spoken to those who questioned both Sith and Jedi dogma. He had stood between the two, not out of confusion, but out of understanding. He had seen what lay beyond the walls both sides had built, and he had walked alone into a chamber of memory to face something none of us could name. The chamber behind the thrones led into a smaller room, a meditation space. Its floor was carved with circular patterns that shifted as we walked across them. In the center, I knelt and closed my eyes. The Force responded not with visions but with rhythm, like breath, like waves upon a shore. I let myself fall into it. I saw fire, yes, but also water. I saw a child laughing, a woman reaching out, a sun standing defiant, and a man, broken and tired, choosing to rise. When I opened my eyes, the light had changed, softer now, as if the temple itself had acknowledged the truth. We left quietly, preserving the holocron and locking the doors behind us. I knew then that we were not uncovering a single story, but unweaving a tapestry of belief, manipulation, and rebellion that had shaped the galaxy in silence. And ahead of us, the next thread waited, hidden still. The heart of the Chosen One had not been claimed by the light, nor corrupted entirely by the dark. It had been torn, and from that tear something far more powerful had begun to rise. Section 7. The Son Who Refused to Fight. Word count. 960. There comes a moment in every legend where the path forward no longer depends on fate, but on choice. And it was in that moment that the legacy of the Chosen One balanced not in the hands of a warrior, but in the heart of a son. What we found next reshaped everything we thought we understood. For it was not only Vader's memories that had been hidden across the stars, but Luke Skywalker's as well. The story was not only about the fall, it was about what dared to rise against it. We traced a long-forgotten distress signal encoded within the holocron recovered from the circle of the veil. It led to an isolated moon surrounded by charged storms, its surface scorched by ancient orbital bombardments. No name marked it on any galactic chart, but the signal was clear. It carried Luke's voice. The descent was treacherous. Winds howled like the cries of old battles, and lightning split the sky in bursts of violet. We touched down near the remains of a stone temple, barely standing against the wind. What remained of its walls was scorched and cracked, yet the foundation pulsed with Force resonance. Inside, buried beneath rubble and shattered idols, we uncovered a crystal record node. The droid carefully linked with its interface. What emerged was not just a message, it was a confession. Luke appeared before us, younger than in the days of Achto, his robe tattered by wind and time. He stood in the center of the recording, his voice steady but heavy. I did not come here as a Jedi. I came as a son. He spoke of the Death Star, of his refusal to kill, of the lightning that tore through him, of the eyes he saw behind the mask. As he collapsed in agony, not the eyes of a Sith Lord, not of a monster, but of a man. He said, "In that moment I saw past the armor, past the fear. I saw him, not Darth Vader, not the Chosen One, just Anakin, and I knew he was still there." The image flickered and now showed Luke carrying his father's broken body through the halls of the dying battle station. Fire raged around him, the structure collapsed, but in that moment everything was still. I asked him why he turned, why he came back. He didn't answer with words, just with silence and a single tear. It was the only time I saw him cry. Luke's message continued, growing more quiet, more reflective. They all believed I defeated the darkness by refusing to fight. But that was not my strength. My strength was in believing that he was more than the mask. The recording ended. We sat in stillness. The force in the chamber trembled. A soft echo remained, not a sound, but a feeling, love, forgiveness, and loss. I understood now. It had never been a duel of power that redeemed Anakin Skywalker. No battle, no prophecy, no legend carved in stone. It had been a simple act of faith, the refusal to strike, the refusal to let hate finish what fear had started, and yet questions remained. If Anakin's return was real, why had the galaxy buried it so quickly? Why had even the Jedi Order, once reborn, shrouded the details of his final act? Was it shame? Was it doubt? Or was it fear? As we prepared to leave, we uncovered a second recording in the node's memory. This one, fragmented, nearly lost, it was audio only. A voice, soft and weakened, not Luke's, Anakin's. They won't understand. They'll say it was too late, that I was too far gone. Maybe they are right. But in those final breaths, I remembered who I was. I remembered her. I remembered them. And I made a choice. The voice cracked. Tell them it was not the Force that saved me. It was love. The message ended in silence. I stood at the shattered threshold of the temple, the wind sweeping through the cracks. Behind me lay evidence of a truth that had been hidden, perhaps even feared, not because it was false, but because it was simple. The redemption of Anakin Skywalker was not forged in prophecy, or war, or fate. It was forged in forgiveness. And yet, even that was not the end of the mystery, because as we lifted from the broken temple and ascended into the night sky, our sensors detected a faint trail left by a single starship departing the moon decades ago. Its registry did not match any known rebel or imperial craft. It had left with something, or someone, and it had gone toward a system that no map dared name. The journey was not over. The truth behind Anakin's final act had been revealed. But the deeper secret, the one that shaped the future as much as the past, still lay ahead, waiting, watching, and whispering through the stars. Section 8. The Bloodline Buried in Light. Word count 1050. The stars bent unnaturally as we entered the shadowed sector beyond the known charts. Our navigation systems stuttered. Gravity ripples struck the ship like silent waves. Time itself seemed to thin and stretch as if resisting our arrival. But the trail was clear. The signal left by the lone ship from the forgotten moon had come here, to a place untouched by war, yet woven into the fabric of every battle that had come before. It was a system without a name, No sun marked its heart. The planets orbited a pale void where light bent but did not shine. At the center of it all drifted a structure so old it defied classification. It was not a station, it was not a temple, it was both, it was neither. It looked as if it had grown from the bones of the galaxy itself. We approached slowly, unsure if we were being observed. No weapons fired, no shields raised. The structure welcomed us in silence. Inside, we passed through chambers carved from smooth black stone, veined with silver. Each corridor whispered with echoes, but they were not mechanical. They were memories. The walls held them like breath, waiting to be released. And as we walked deeper, we felt it. The presence, not of Vader, not of Luke, of something older. In the central hall, we found a circle of stasis chambers, 6 in total. 5 were empty. The 6th pulsed faintly with power, its glass frosted over from within. And beside it, a console flickered, projecting a single symbol, the crest of the Skywalker bloodline. The droid accessed the console. The data within had been encrypted using an algorithm linked to Jedi archives, but also coded in Sith syntax.
A hybrid language, a bridge between two paths once thought unbridgeable. The message that played was not from Anakin.
Not from Luke. It was from Leia. Her voice was calm, but heavy with burden. They always speak of the Chosen One, of how he fell and how he rose. But they never asked what it cost the rest of us. The prophecy was not a promise. It was a warning. She spoke of secrets passed to her after the Battle of Endor, of hidden data left by Obi-Wan, Yoda, and even Bail Organa. A lineage not of power, but of purpose. The Skywalkers had been shaped by the Force, yes, but also manipulated by it. She said, "We were not chosen by destiny. We were shaped by generations of fear. The Jedi tried to guide us, the Sith tried to own us, but neither ever understood what we truly were." The message shifted, revealing fragments of old records, genetic blueprints, experimental data, midichlorian modulation files from Kaminoan science labs, cross-referenced with Jedi archives dating back to the High Republic. It was not the dark side that had created Anakin Skywalker. It had been the Force itself. Convergence of energy manipulated through unknown means. An act neither natural nor entirely artificial, a response, a correction, or perhaps a test. Leia's voice returned. "My father was not born, he was summoned, but what they failed to understand was that the Force does not choose sides, it only
Reacts, it echoes, it reflects." She paused, "and sometimes it breaks." The truth shattered what little certainty we had left.
Anakin had not simply been a gifted child, he had been created, perhaps by will, perhaps by fear, shaped by prophecy, caged by expectation. His fall had not been a failure of character, it had been the product of forces that never gave him a choice, and yet he had made one. In the end, he had still chosen love over power. He had chosen to die as Anakin, not to live forever as Vader. That was the paradox. The Force created a being of immense potential, then watched as he tore the galaxy apart and stitched a final thread of hope back into it with his last breath. But the message did not end there. Leia's final words were nearly whispered. They believed Anakin's story ended with redemption, but they were wrong. The Force is still watching. The bloodline still echoes. And somewhere, hidden in the silence between stars, the last secret waits. As the recording faded, the stasis pod beside us cracked. A hiss of ancient air escaped. We stepped back as the frost began to melt from the inside. Inside the chamber was a figure, not a clone, not a corpse, but a child, unmoving, preserved, and unmistakably of Skywalker descent. The systems registered no vitals, but the Force trembled. The key droid ran diagnostics, unsure how or when the chamber had been sealed. The files gave no names, no time of birth, no DNA donor, only a single phrase in Jedi tongue, born of silence, raised in shadow, awaiting balance. We left the chamber untouched. The answers it held were not yet ready to be awakened, not yet. But as we returned to the ship, one truth echoed louder than all the rest. The story of Darth Vader's redemption was not the end of the prophecy. It was the beginning of something far greater, and the final thread of that story had just begun to stir. Section 9. The Gathering of Wisdom. Word count, 980 in the darkest chambers of the Force. There are places where light does not fight the shadow but folds into it, where memory is not forgotten but guarded, where truth, when finally found, does not roar like thunder but speaks like a whisper through the stillness. That is where we found ourselves now, caught between revelations and the silence that followed. And from across the stars, voices began to gather. The journey from the nameless system to the Council Archive on Ossus was long, but the path was clear. The discovery of the preserved child, locked in stasis and marked by the Force, had sent ripples through the galaxy's hidden corners. Not political powers, not military forces, but the Watchers, the Seers, the ones who listened when the Force stirred. The Council Archive, once reduced to ruin in the age of Imperial conquest, had been rebuilt in secret by a circle of Force historians. They were not Jedi nor Sith. They did not train. They did not command. They only remembered. And when we arrived, they were waiting. We stood beneath a sky of amber clouds as the sun dipped behind the silver domes of the archive spires. Inside, the halls were lined with preserved memory crystals, each humming softly with fragments of history. Every step we took echoed like a step across time. One of the elders greeted us, a woman with white eyes and a voice like still water. She led us into the chamber of records where others had gathered, scholars, hermits, survivors of forgotten temples. They had all heard the call. The recordings we brought were placed into the center of the circle, the holocrons from the ruins, the voice of Luke, the confession of Leia, and the stasis chamber data that held the unanswered question. The elder listened. Then she spoke. The galaxy has always feared one truth, that the Force is not loyal, that it is not just, that it simply is. She extended her hand and revealed a scroll bound in golden thread. It was not digital, it was not Jedi, it was something far older, the writings of the Dai Bendu. On it were prophecies never canonized by the Jedi Temple. Not warnings, not visions of chosen ones, but patterns, bloodlines shaped across millennia. Moments where the Force reached into the galaxy not to save it, but to test it, where light was not the reward and darkness was not the punishment. Only balance, temporary, fragile, shifting. We read together in silence. From one born without father shall come the tremor. From one who strikes with mercy shall come the fracture. And from one who walks between stars unborn shall come the restoration. The room fell still. We had seen the tremor in Anakin. the mercy in Luke. And now the third line remained, the restoration. One of the archivists, a Mirialan who had studied the force patterns in stellar movements, showed us a map. Ancient symbols aligned with galactic events, the fall of the Jedi, the birth of Vader, the redemption aboard the Death Star. Each one had been marked by a celestial convergence. But a new alignment was beginning. It would not peak for several years, but already subtle shifts in the Force were echoing in strange
ways.
Visions were returning. Jedi ghosts had been seen in temples thought long empty. Lightsabers buried for centuries were humming again. And deep in the wild regions, stars were blinking out. The Elder turned to me. You sought the story of Darth Vader's redemption, but what you have found is the continuation of that tale. It did not end in fire, it began there. And the Force has not stopped speaking since. We meditated in the upper dome as the sun vanished fully. The night above was thick with stars. Through the glass, the galaxy spun in silence. In that moment, something shifted. I saw Obi-Wan standing on the edge of a canyon, looking down not with judgment, but sorrow. I saw Yoda sitting in silence beside a tree, watching a fire fade. I saw Luke walking alone through a field of golden grass, his lightsaber left behind. And then I saw Anakin, not as Vader, not as the Jedi Knight, but simply as a man. He was standing in front of a vast window, watching the stars. In his reflection stood the preserved child. They did not speak, but they were connected. The vision faded. When I opened my eyes, I knew that everything we had learned was still only part of the truth. The third open loop had revealed itself. It was not just about who Anakin was, it was about what would come after him, and as we left the archive and returned to our ship, the stars felt different. They felt expectant. Somewhere in the galaxy, something long buried had started to breathe again, and the Force was listening. Section 10, the final act of the chosen one word, count. 1060. There are moments in the galaxy's long memory when time itself pauses. Not in silence, not in stillness, but in revelation, where the past and future meet in one breath, and the truth long buried rises like a tide that cannot be turned back. It was in one such moment that the final act of Anakin Skywalker revealed itself, not in battle, but in clarity. The Elder from the archive had spoken of one last holocron, a forbidden artifact never entered into official Jedi or Sith records. It was known only through whispers. A fragment of a confession recorded by Vader himself, hidden deep within a vault, not on a world, but on a moving vessel. A ship long thought lost during the fall of the Empire. The ship was called the Solace. It had been part of a classified initiative known only to Palpatine's closest circle. A mobile black vault that carried Sith relics too dangerous to store.
Anywhere else. When the Death Star fell, the Solace vanished.
Until now, we found its trail deep in the wreckage fields beyond the ghost system of Kirilan, where dead stars drift in silence, and even the Force seems hesitant to reach. We moved through debris and ruin, and at last we saw it, the Solace, still intact but dark, lifeless, waiting. We boarded cautiously, no lights, no power. The air was stale but breathable. The halls were lined with containers, each one sealed by symbols, both Sith and ancient. The walls felt heavy, not with physical pressure, but with the weight of untold truths. In the heart of the vessel, deep beneath its command core, we found the vault. It was sealed by a force lock, requiring both Jedi and Sith signatures to open. I placed my hand upon the panel. The droid activated a simulated imprint from the last Sith Guardian. The vault opened. Inside, on a pedestal made of black stone, sat a single holocron. No glow, no hum, just stillness. I touched it, and the force pulled me inward. The chamber around me faded. What emerged was not a vision, but a memory. Not reconstructed, not filtered. It was him, Anakin. He stood alone in a room with no walls. Only starlight surrounded him. His armor was cracked. His face was exposed. The mask lay at his feet. He did not speak immediately. Then he looked up. If you are hearing this, then you have gone further than most. You are searching for something more than power. You are searching for me. He stepped forward. They all think they understand why I turned, why I fell. Some say it was love. Others say it was fear. The truth is, it was silence. I screamed into the Force, and it did not answer, so I listened to the one who did. Palpatine offered me purpose, not hope, not peace, just direction. When the Jedi turned away from me, he opened the door, but I walked through it. He lowered his eyes, and I paid the price. Images surrounded him. Padme reaching out, her voice trembling. Obi-Wan shouting from the fires of Mustafar, the temple in flames, younglings hiding, the Emperor laughing. Then the Death Star, Luke's face defiant and calm. You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi like my father before me. And then the choice. Anakin's voice returned. In that moment, the Force spoke again, not with words, with feeling. I saw Padme. I saw what I had become. I saw my son refusing to raise his blade. Not because he was weak, because he was strong. Stronger than I ever was. Stronger than the prophecy. He looked directly into me. I made my final choice, not because I was redeemed, but because I remembered who I had once been.
I remembered Anakin Skywalker. He raised the mask from the floor and held it in his hands, and I chose to leave him behind. The memory faded. I was back in the vault. The holocron was silent again. No more recordings, no more secrets, just that one.
Truth. He had not been saved by prophecy. He had not been redeemed by legend. He had chosen. In the archives of time, there are phrases that carry weight far beyond their length. I am your father. You were right about me. I am Anakin. Each one a blade of meaning cutting through history. We left the solace in silence. No words were spoken. None were needed. I looked out into the stars and felt the Force moving. It no longer pulled. It no longer pushed. It listened. And in that stillness, I remembered the first words of this journey. A whisper lost in time. Now I understood. That whisper had never faded. It had waited, and now it had spoken. Section 11. Shadows that became light. Word count, 970 across the galaxy. Stars burn without knowing who watches them. Empires rise, heroes fall, and truths are forgotten beneath the noise of time. But the Force remembers, not as a record of victories or defeats, but as echoes, choices, and in the end it is choice that defines all things. The final revelation was not written in ancient texts or locked in hidden vaults. It was buried in silence, waiting for someone to listen. The holocron aboard the Solace had given us the final words of Anakin Skywalker, not the Sith Lord, not the Jedi Knight, the man. His voice still lingered within me as we left that dark vessel and returned to known space. But the galaxy had already begun to shift. Throughout the outer rim, unregistered force surges were reported. Across long-dead battlefields, ancient weapons, lit for the first time in decades, old temples began to stir, crystals whispered, children dreamed of places they had never seen. And at the center of it all, the mystery we thought we had solved opened wider. Because now the third open loop had shown its shape. The child we found in stasis, the being not born but preserved, a Skywalker not by name but by essence. The records from the Solace were clear. The Emperor had feared not Vader's fall, but what might rise from his redemption. He had ordered an initiative not to preserve Sith knowledge, but to prevent its undoing. The stasis pod was created not as salvation, but as containment. Leia
Had known. Luke had wondered. Anakin had chosen. But Palpatine had prepared. He had seen that the bloodline might one day produce not a tyrant, not a savior, but something else entirely.
a being who would walk where no Jedi dared, who would see the Force not as sides but as truth. The restoration the ancient texts spoke of, and now that being was awake. We returned to the temple on Ossus. The scholars were waiting. They had felt it too. The Force was not shifting, it was balancing. The pendulum between light and dark had slowed, the extremes were fading, and in their place something whole was beginning to take form. The preserved child was transferred there, still dormant, still silent. But around the chamber, flowers began to grow where none had before. A kyber shard cracked, then mended itself. A Padawan with no lineage felt the Force for the first time. And among the gathered, none spoke of war, none spoke of power, only purpose. As I stood at the edge of that quiet miracle, I began to understand the final truth. Redemption is not the end of a path. It is the return to the beginning. The choice to walk again, knowing what was lost, knowing what could still be saved. Anakin had not undone the damage. He had not erased the pain. But his act had cracked the foundation of the darkness, not by destroying it, but by choosing not to live within it. And through that choice, others would rise. I asked the elder of Ossus what would happen next. If this new Force, this awakening, was something to be feared or welcomed. She smiled and replied, "That depends on what we choose to become." Her words echoed in my mind as we prepared to leave once more, not into exile but into quiet. Our role was not to guide, not to shape, but to witness, to remember, to carry the truth into stories so that when the time came, others would recognize the signs. The Force had revealed its last lesson. It is not a gift to be claimed. It is not a weapon to be used. It is a mirror. And what we see in it is what we truly are. As we lifted from Ossus and returned to the stars, I looked down at the child one last time, eyes still closed, breath still silent. But around him, the Force shimmered like dawn. The final mystery had resolved itself, not in prophecy, not in legacy, but in peace. And though the galaxy did not know it, it had already changed forever. Section 12, The Light That Remains. Word count 590. In the end, the galaxy did not erupt in fire. There was no battle. No final clash of sabers beneath falling stars. The last act of the Chosen One was not written in the cries of war, but in the quiet breath of a story finally understood. A story not of power, but of peace. Not of domination, but of release. The stars drifted silently above the temple on Ossus. They shimmered like ancient memories suspended in the dark. Below them, the child remained at rest, not frozen in time, but growing quietly within it. Around him, the force pulsed gently, no longer wild, no longer torn, balanced. I stood alone beneath the sky, the journey behind me now woven into memory. I had seen temples lost beneath dust, archives hidden in silence, voices that had waited lifetimes to speak. And I had heard the truth, not from heroes or masters, but from those who had fallen, those who had risen, and those who had chosen. Anakin Skywalker had not been the end of the prophecy. He had been its beginning. Redemption had not come through destiny, but through defiance. A single act of love in the face of endless hatred, a final choice to become less feared and more human. And that choice had rippled outward, quietly, powerfully, eternally. Now, as the wind passed softly through the ruins of old stone and new life bloomed from ancient soil, I understood what the Force had been trying to say all along. The light was
never meant to destroy the dark, only to remember it, only to forgive it, only to rise beyond it. I closed my eyes and listened.
not to machines or legends, but to the galaxy itself. And in that silence I heard a sound, a whisper, familiar, gentle. It was not Anakin's voice. It was not Vader's. It was both, and it was neither. It was the story itself, still unfolding, still breathing, still waiting to be heard by those who remember how to listen. Thank you for walking this path with me. If the stars have carried you into sleep, may your dreams drift gently across the sands of forgotten worlds and into the quiet heart of the Force. And if you are still awake, I invite you to return. There are more stories yet untold, more voices lost in time, more mysteries waiting beneath the surface of the galaxy. Subscribe, rest, remember, because in every ending the Force leaves behind a beginning, and the light that remains will always find its way home.